Many organizations going through any sort of digital or business transformation are trying to move towards a shared services model. What exactly is a shared service model? Does it fit for your organization, and how do we deploy it? That's what I want to talk about here today. My name is Eric Kimberling. I'm the CEO of Third Stage Consulting. We're an independent consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world reach the third stage of digital transformation success. And we're helping organizations through their digital transformation journeys, their ERP implementations, et cetera. One of the most common things that we deal with is helping them move to a shared services model. And this is especially true for larger organizations that have grown through acquisition. And I'm going to talk in a moment in more detail about what exactly a shared service model is. But just to summarize, to get started, a shared service model is really a way to consolidate some of the back office functions so that you can be more consistent and more efficient, more effective in the way you run your operations. And again, this is especially true for larger organizations that have grown through mergers and acquisitions. And the reason for that is because when organizations go out and acquire other companies, typically they buy these companies that have duplicate functions throughout the organization. And so one of the things you can do to become more efficient, more profitable, is to move to a shared service model to where you consolidate operations and remove some of those inefficiencies and duplications. So we'll talk more throughout this video about what exactly shared services is and how you can deploy it as part of your digital or business transformation. Before we dive too far into today's content, I want to share a little bit of information about Third Stage Consulting and who we are. Third Stage Consulting Group is an independent, technology agnostic provider of consulting services to help clients through their digital transformations. We help with digital strategy and software selection, as well as implementation planning. And during implementation, we provide services related to program management, organizational change, business process improvement, as well as enterprise architecture. These are just some of the services we provide. We have offices in North America as well as Europe and Asia Pacific. So if you'd like to learn more, I encourage you to check out our resource center, which includes a number of resources that will help you through your digital transformation, and you can access that for free using the QR code here or the links below. You can also reach out to me directly if you'd like to discuss your digital transformation and brainstorm ideas on how to improve where you're headed on your journey. Now let's jump back into today's content. So before we dive into the different dimensions of how to roll out a shared service model, it helps to first understand what exactly is a shared service model. And to summarize, a shared service model is essentially taking a function where you have redundancy or duplicate efforts in the organization. So for example, a lot of common functions that we see move to a shared service model would be things like IT, HR, procurement, finance, accounting. A lot of these back office functions that you don't need to have multiple ways of operating, you don't need to have multiple departments doing the same thing. You could have a shared service model that does that one function. So for example, let's say that you're a company that's very acquisitive, you're out acquiring companies. You've acquired 10 companies over the last couple of years, and all 10 of those companies have a separate finance and accounting group. But then the question becomes, do we really need 10 finance and accounting groups just because we bought 10 companies that already have 10 finance and accounting groups? The answer is probably no, you don't. So what a lot of organizations will do is say, we are going to move away from having 10 finance and accounting groups, and we're going to move to one finance and accounting group that supports the entire business. Now, obviously, this is a big shift. This is a big lift to move from a big organizational change of 10 different departments down to one, but it is a move that makes a lot of sense for organizations, especially those that have grown through mergers and acquisitions and or have just grown very quickly organically and have organically built different functions and duplicate departments and processes throughout the organization. So shared services is really just a fancy word to describe the consolidation of a function that exists in multiple places in the organization. We're consolidating it down to one shared function that supports the entire organization. So now that we understand what shared services is, now the question becomes, well, how do we get there? What do we do to create that shared service model? And the first thing you typically do is define what your shared service business processes are going to be. How are we going to harmonize business processes? If we have 10 different ways of operating a finance function, for example, chances are pretty high that you're going to have some best practices or some best ways of operating within each of those 10 different departments. So process harmonization is a way to take the best of what you've got across these different departments and pick a model that's going to make the most sense for the entire organization. And so in this case, we might find that we define one set of business processes that are going to support our finance and accounting function across the entire operation going forward, rather than having this multitude of different ways of operating. So process harmonization is the first step in moving towards a shared service model. And process harmonization is also a good litmus test to see if it makes sense for you to move to a shared service model. If it's a function where it just doesn't make any sort of sense for you to harmonize processes, or in other words, you find value in having different processes because it supports a certain market better or a certain customer base better, then maybe that's not a good candidate for a shared service model. So if it is an area that can be optimized and you can move to a standard set of business processes, then chances are pretty high that it is a good candidate to move to a shared service model. Once we've defined what our standard harmonized business processes are going to be, next we need to define what the organization is going to look like. What are the roles and responsibilities going to be, who's going to do what, and we also have the hard decision of who's going to stay and who's going to go. Because oftentimes when you move to a shared service model, it inevitably means that you're going to either displace and or replace or remove or eliminate jobs within the organization. So shared services models are highly disruptive organizationally because there is a perception of some negative fallout, and there is some negative fallout from it oftentimes, because if the goal is to become more efficient, to gain some of the efficiencies and scale that you could achieve as a larger organization, inevitably that's often going to mean that you're laying people off, or at the very least you're disrupting their jobs and forcing a huge amount of change within those employees that will still remain at the organization. So change management is important in any sort of digital or business transformation, but even more so for organizations that are moving to a shared service model. But in the case of larger organizations that have a lot of inefficiency and a lot of redundancy, a lot of duplicate efforts, it could be a low-hanging fruit or a way to dramatically increase the value of their business by moving to a shared service model. Now, one of the keys to a successful shared service model is to ensure that you have a solid business case justification. It may sound good in theory to move to a shared service model, but you may find that you can't justify the cost and the benefit of doing so. Or it could be that there's only certain functions within your business that do make sense, and there might be other functions that don't make sense from a ROI or return on investment perspective. So just like any sort of change initiative or any sort of investment in your business, you want to make sure that you can justify the business value that you expect to get out of the shared service model. And oftentimes that involves technology changes, which I'm going to talk about here in just a moment. It also oftentimes involves process and organizational changes that I've already discussed. So we need to look at what is the overall cost and the impact to the organization, and then what is the expected business value that we would hope to see from that. And once you've done that assessment, that's going to help inform whether or not it makes sense to move forward with a shared service model. Now, once we've defined the process harmonization, we've defined the new organization, we've looked at the business case and the potential business value of moving to a shared service model, now we need to figure out what technology platform or platforms might best enable that shared service model. And again, if you've grown through acquisition and you've acquired 10 different companies, back to my earlier example, chances are pretty high you've got multiple systems being used in those 10 different operations. It may be in some cases that you have 10 different systems being used, and now you've got to figure out how are we going to move to one platform, one common set of business processes within that platform, and that's where the software evaluation and selection process becomes important. Now, in this video, I'm not going to dive into the details and the methodologies of how to select software, but I have other videos on my YouTube channel that'll help you do that. In fact, if you click this playlist right here, this is all the software selection related videos that we've released on my YouTube channel. Just check out this link right here to go see some of those videos, and you can learn more about how to go through the evaluation process. But the whole point here is to point out that generally speaking, when you move to a shared service model, you're generally moving towards a new platform, or at least consolidating onto one platform as well. Now, once we've defined where we're going to move to a shared service model, now we need to bake that transition into our overall digital or business transformation program plan. If you're doing this as part of a broader technology initiative, chances are pretty high that you already have a technology roadmap or a technology plan laid out. However, that technology plan probably doesn't account for the fact that you're going through all this hard work organizationally and operationally to move towards a shared service model. So if the real business value you're expecting to get out of your transformation is through the shared service model, you want to make sure that you bake in enough time, resource commitment, and budget to ensure that you can move towards that shared service model. Otherwise, what will end up happening inevitably is you're going to implement technology quickly, but you're going to end up paving the cow paths and just implementing technology the way you've always implemented technology and continuing to operate business as usual rather than moving towards the higher value potential of a shared service model. So you want to make sure that you have a realistic plan and strategy and budget and resource allocation that takes into account the complexities and the difficulty of moving to a shared service model. So I hope this has given you some good guidance and insights into what the shared service model is and how it might apply to your digital transformation. This is obviously a big change management initiative, so if you'd like to learn more about organizational change and how to address the human factor within digital transformations, I encourage you to read our Guide to Organizational Change Management. It's a free guide on our website. You can read it by scanning the QR code right here, or you can go to the links below. So I hope you found this information useful and hope you have a great day.